In the world of modern faith leadership, few figures have commanded a stage as large as Bishop T.D. Jakes. For decades, he has been a towering presence, a best-selling author, a cinematic producer, a charismatic preacher whose sermons resonate with millions, and the founder and leader of the Potter's House, a megachurch based in Dallas, Texas. His message of empowerment, resilience, and divine possibility transcended racial and denominational lines, forging a unique bridge between the pulpit and the mainstream platforms of media and entertainment. He built an empire not just on faith, but on a brand of inspirational leadership that positioned him as a spiritual guide for the 21st century. Yet, the very foundations of that empire are now facing seismic tremors. A series of serious allegations has erupted into public view, triggering a massive backlash and plunging Jakes' ministry into its most profound crisis. These claims, ranging from financial impropriety to personal misconduct, have ignited a firestorm of debate, disappointment, and soul-searching among his global following. This is not merely a story about one man, it is a case study in the complex intersection of faith, fame, power, and accountability in the digital age. It forces us to ask uncomfortable questions about the structures of modern religious leadership and the fragile covenant of trust between a shepherd and his flock. This script will delve into the multifaceted nature of the allegations against T.D. Jakes, analyze the volatile public reaction, and explore the profound implications of this controversy. We will trace how the narrative evolved from specific claims into a broader crisis of image and perception, ultimately challenging the legacy of one of America's most influential religious figures. Part 1: The Anatomy of the Allegations. A breach of trust. The backlash against T.D. Jakes did not emerge from a vacuum. It is fueled by a cluster of allegations that strike at the heart of what a religious leader represents: integrity, stewardship, and moral authority. Financial improprieties. Among the most damaging claims are those concerning the financial operations of Jakes' ministry and his personal enrichment. Critics and anonymous insiders have raised pointed questions about the flow of millions of dollars in donations. Allegations suggest that ministry funds may have been leveraged for personal gain, including luxury lifestyles, real estate ventures, and the financing of family members' projects. The opacity of the financial structures surrounding his church, film productions, and business enterprises has led to calls for forensic audits and greater transparency. For congregants who tithe and give offerings, often from limited means, the suggestion that their faithful contributions might have been misdirected is not just disappointing, it feels like a spiritual and financial betrayal. Misconduct and inappropriate behavior. Parallel to the financial claims are allegations of misconduct. These include claims of leveraging spiritual authority for inappropriate relationships, though specifics often remain in the realm of anonymous online testimonies and rumors. More visibly, there have been critiques of demeaning or harsh treatment of staff and associates, painting a picture of a leadership culture that contradicts the public message of empowerment and love. While often lacking formal legal charges, these narratives contribute to a pattern of behavior that critics argue is abusive of power. The silence and the legal shield. The response from Jakes and the Potter's House to these allegations has largely been one of minimal public engagement and robust legal defense. Statements have typically been broad, affirming commitment to ministry and denying wrongdoing, but they rarely address specific claims. This strategy of controlled messaging and legal perimeter defense, while understandable from a risk management perspective, has paradoxically fueled the controversy. In the court of public opinion, silence is frequently interpreted as guilt. The lack of a detailed, point-by-point rebuttal or an independent investigation sanctioned by the church has created a vacuum. And in that vacuum, speculation and narrative thrive. The cumulative weight of these allegations is a profound breach of trust. Followers did not just see Jakes as a preacher. For many, he was a lifeline, a source of hope during unemployment, grief, and personal failure. The potential that this figure may have engaged in the very behaviors he preached against creates a cognitive and spiritual dissonance that manifests as deep hurt and anger. This is the emotional fuel of the backlash. Part 2: The Court of Public Opinion, Social Media and the Fractured Flock. The allegations against T.D. Jakes landed in the modern era's ultimate arena for judgment, social media. This transformed a potentially containable scandal into a relentless, 24/7 global tribunal. The acceleration of narrative platforms like Twitter, X, YouTube, and Instagram became the stages for a sprawling, chaotic drama. Hashtags trend, edited video compilations of contradictions went viral, and personal testimonies, both accusatory and defensive, were amplified to millions. The traditional gatekeepers of media and church hierarchies were bypassed. The story was no longer reported, it was crowdsourced, memed, and live-streamed. This environment privileges emotion and momentum over verification, allowing allegations to solidify into accepted truth long before any formal investigation could conclude. The Great Divide. The online discourse revealed a community violently fractured. The disillusioned, a significant segment of former admirers publicly declared their departure. Their posts are tinged with grief and betrayal. Phrases like "I'm heartbroken," "this is the last straw," and "I can't follow someone I don't trust" became common. For them, the allegations confirmed lingering doubts or provided a framework for unexplained unease they felt about the merger of ministry and celebrity. The defenders, a loyal cohort, mounted a vigorous defense. Their arguments are multifaceted. They claim the allegations are vague and lack concrete evidence. They frame the controversy as a coordinated attack on a successful black leader, drawing parallels to historical efforts to undermine black excellence and authority. They cite Jakes' decades of community work, philanthropy, and inspirational messages as the fruit that outweighs unproven rumors. They accuse critics of being led by jealousy, a demonic spirit of division, or a desire to see a powerful man fall. The observers and critics beyond the immediate circle of followers, cultural commentators, journalists, and critics of megachurch culture seized on the story. Their focus was less on Jakes personally and more on systemic issues: the lack of accountability in congregational polity, the dangers of pastor as CEO models, and the theological compromises made when faith becomes a branded commodity. This layer of commentary elevated the story from a personal scandal to a symbolic one. The result was a deeply personal, often toxic, digital civil war. Families argued in comment sections. Friendships strained over posts. The controversy was no longer about a distant leader. It was now a litmus test for faith and judgment within everyone's personal network. Part 3: The pivot to perception, faith, fame, and guilty by association. Just as the initial allegations reached a fever pitch, the controversy underwent a critical and damaging evolution. The focus expanded beyond internal church matters or financial audits into the realm of image and perception. Specifically, Jakes' long-cultivated relationships with the world of secular entertainment and high-powered celebrity. A network re-examined 4 years, Jakes' connections were a celebrated part of his brand. He preached at music awards, consulted on films about black excellence, offered public spiritual counsel to stars, and appeared at high-profile events. This was framed as influencing the culture and taking the gospel into the marketplace. However, in the shadow of scandal, the same network was scrutinized under a sinister light. Old photos and videos resurfaced: Jakes at exclusive parties with hip-hop moguls, at lavish industry gatherings, in green rooms with celebrities known for lifestyles in stark contrast to traditional church values. The optics of access, the question shifted from what did he do, to where was he and who was he with. Critics posed a damning rhetorical question: can a man who preaches holiness, sexual purity, and modest living genuinely be a light in environments characterized by extravagance, sensuality, and potential vice, without being compromised? The narrative of mentoring was met with skepticism. The perception became one of a pastor enamored with access to fame, comfortable in circles where his own stated values were seemingly optional. This guilty by association framework was devastating because it deals in impressions, not facts. It weaponized Jakes' own success in crossing over into mainstream culture. The core dilemma: this pivot forced a public grappling with a fundamental dilemma of modern evangelicalism, the tension between engagement and separation. Was Jakes a shrewd missionary to the elite, or had the allure of their world diluted his spiritual integrity? The controversy suggested that in the minds of many, faith and fame cannot coexist without corruption. The power and influence he gained may have, in the public's re-evaluation, slowly transformed the pastor into a different kind of power broker, one whose spiritual authority was now irrevocably tangled with worldly clout. This phase of the scandal was perhaps the most culturally significant. It was no longer about possible financial crimes or personal sins. It was about character and consistency. The curated image of the powerful, connected, yet holy bishop now seemed fragile, even hypocritical. The trust wasn't just broken by what he might have done, but by who he appeared to be. Part 4: The unraveling and the lingering questions. A legacy altered as the storm raged. The tangible impacts became clear. While no criminal charges have been filed, and no denominational body has defrocked him, his church is independent, answering largely to its own board. The damage has been profound and likely permanent. Erosion of influence: Jakes' unquestioned moral authority has eroded. His pronouncements on social issues, personal conduct, or financial wisdom are now met with a layer of public cynicism. Invitations to speak at national events or consult on matters of moral leadership may diminish. The brand is tarnished. Ministerial fallout: reports suggest attendance and donations at the Potter's house have felt an impact. More painfully, pastors and leaders who once looked to him as a model are now forced to distance themselves or answer difficult questions from their own congregations. The Jakes model of ministry is now a cautionary tale in many circles. The human and spiritual toll beyond the public sphere: the human cost is immense. For Jakes, his family, and his close associates, this represents a period of intense personal trial. For the sincere believer who found God through his ministry, there is spiritual confusion and pain. The scandal has forced a crisis of faith that extends far beyond one man. Conclusion: the unresolved verdict and the new normal. The controversy surrounding T.D. Jakes does not offer a neat conclusion. There is no dramatic courtroom verdict, no definitive public confession, no single piece of evidence that settles the matter for all. This, in many ways, is the defining and most frustrating feature of the story. We are left with a series of unresolved, haunting questions. Is this the rightful accountability of a leader who operated without sufficient checks and balances, finally facing the consequences of his actions? Or is it a tragedy of rumors, a modern-day crucifixion by social media, where allegations, once uttered, become their own proof, especially when targeted at a prominent black figure? Has the public, in its hunger for drama and fallen heroes, conflicted genuine sin with the complexities of a large public ministry navigating the modern world? What is the responsibility of a follower to offer grace and presume innocence, or to demand transparency and follow their conscience away from a compromised leader? One truth, however, has crystallized: the legacy of T.D. Jakes has been permanently altered. The narrative of his life and work now has a glaring, contentious chapter. The man once beyond question is now a man defined by questions. Faith, once shaken, is never easily restored, whether that faith was in the man, the institution he built, or the idea that spiritual power and worldly influence can safely coexist. The story's final turn reminds us that in our digital, post-truth age, reputation often moves faster than truth, and perception can become its own reality. Whether T.D. Jakes' story ultimately bends toward redemption or ruin, the journey has already exposed the fragile pedestals upon which we build our modern-day prophets, and the tumultuous process that ensues when those pedestals begin to crack. Final thought: this saga forces a reflection not just on one leader, but on all of us who participate in creating, sustaining, and sometimes tearing down our icons. It asks us to examine what we truly expect from our spiritual guides in an era of celebrity, and what mechanisms of integrity we are willing to insist upon before crisis strikes. The backlash against T.D. Jakes is, ultimately, a mirror.